Hi, my name is Elaine Metlin. Welcome to my garden. In late autumn of 2003, we purchased our new home in McLean. The neighborhood, Franklin Park, is known for its trees and calls itself an urban forest. The lot was filled with many different varieties of trees: oaks, maples, sweet gum, ash, and sycamores. And the colorful fall leaves surrounding the house were stunning. Our move took place in the dead of winter. When spring finally came, the beds in the front of the house sprung to life. They had been landscaped with fairly traditional foundation plants: Japanese barberry, burning bush, nandina, cherry laurel. There were some nice understory trees, dogwoods and a redwood, to complement the old hardwoods. The design, with its curving beds and a very small lawn, was lovely. The backyard had no landscaping to speak of. There was a fence enclosing much of the property. Other than a couple of retaining walls and a huge play set, the yard had a bunch of scraggly grass and weeds, and it had a fairly steep slope down to the creek. Due to the fence and vegetation, you could barely see the creek except in the winter and early spring. By summer, there was no reason to cross the footbridge, as the bamboo, English ivy, and other vines on the other side of the creek made the area impassable. After we learned from the zoning commission that our fence and swing set were out of code, we decided to do some landscaping in the backyard. One of my neighbors recommended her landscape designer, Tom Mannion. His portfolio and his landscape drawings opened my eyes to the hidden possibilities of the backyard. The garden was created in the summer of 2008. The area across the creek was planted in the following spring. Tom had a vision of the garden, and happily it included a lot of native plants. We installed clethra, Itea virginica, winterberry, false indigo, Amsonia, Spigelia marilandica, Annabelle, and oakleaf hydrangeas. We planted 30 trees, and many of them were natives: river birch, serviceberry, sweet bay magnolias, southern magnolias, hollies, and bald cypress. All of the digging and terracing was done by hand over the summer of 2008. The English ivy on the side of the creek was removed by hand and replaced with many varieties of ferns, swamp milkweed, Lobelia cardinalis. Mayapples, spice bushes, dogwoods, and hardwoods, including a huge bald cypress, towering sycamores, oaks, and tulip poplars, were already there. In 2016, I applied to the Fairfax County Master Gardener Program, and I became certified in 2019, which has had a profound effect on my gardening philosophy. Even though I've been gardening since the 70s, I have learned so much from the great speakers and reading materials and the close interaction with other gardeners who are so knowledgeable about a wide range of subjects. Through the Master Gardener Program, I learned about Professor Doug Tallamy, who is a pioneer in the native plant movement. All of these influences have made me see the garden as not just a beautiful sanctuary for humans, but an eco-diverse space that nurtures insects and other pollinators, birds, and wildlife. Gardens are never static. Most of the original plantings are still there, but some things have completely disappeared or moved to a different, more hospitable site. Lobelia cardinalis and Pachyra aurea have jumped the creek, and the lobelia and white turtlehead have now migrated to the front yard. I'm letting them stay. The chasmanthium almost took over in its second season, but now it is spreading in a more civilized manner, and I'm trying to let it grow where I need it most. I fought to keep the neighbor's bamboo at bay. I go after the Japanese knotweed every year, and I'm trying to get rid of the lesser celandine, though right now it's winning. Over the years, I have added more natives to the garden. In the area across the creek, I now have Asarum canadense, Jacob's ladder, wood poppy, Phlox tavericata, Lobelia syphilitica, white turtlehead, narrow leaf mountain mint, and boneset. The royal ferns have taken over most of the wet meadow. Of the 3 grassy areas that Tom envisioned, 1 is gone. I sodded and reseeded 3 times before I learned what the garden was teaching me and gave up on the grass. In its place are elderberry cultivars, fothergilla, ferns, lizard's tail, a young 9-bark, along with some non-natives like ligularia and plum yew. Though we planted many trees, we also lost a few to construction damage originally and then high winds or heavy rain. In fact, we lost a huge tulip poplar in the windstorm on April 30th. Now I have a bit more sun, but I'm going to miss that tree, and so will the birds. You have to make constant adjustments and go with the flow of the garden. In 2019, the garden was certified as an Audubon at Home wildlife sanctuary. My gardening plans now include more snags and deadwood for the birds and insects, brush piles for shelter, leaving the leaves on the ground and the stems of the perennials standing until the spring. There is no question that the garden is messier, but knowing that I am creating and enhancing habitat for the birds and pollinators is well worth it. Every spring, the wood frogs lay their eggs in our little fish pond where we keep goldfish. We have many species of birds, including lots of red-shouldered hawks. We recently purchased a trail camera and are entertained nightly by a handsome fox, rabbits, a raccoon, and even a wild turkey. So when I saw a rabbit the other day, my first thought was not to protect the garden, but to be happy, because without the rabbits, we would not have all of the hawks. And of course, we still have way too many deer. In addition to the zoning issues that indirectly led to the garden's creation, there are 2 challenges that have persisted and even gotten worse over time. First, the deer. When I'm out in the garden, half of the neighbors who walk by stop and ask what I do to discourage the deer. They are a constant presence and are not just an annoyance. They not only spread the risk of Lyme disease, but they destroy habitat by browsing on young tree seedlings, native shrubs, and native wildflowers. When these plants are destroyed, non-native plants move in and drive out the food sources and shelter for the birds. Because I can't fence the yard, I try to find plants that deer don't like, though no plants are 100% deer-proof. Plus, I use different deer repellents to discourage them from browsing. The other challenge, which is even more concerning, is the creek and its ever more extreme flooding. As you see from the pictures, we are just downstream from 2 giant storm drains. When we have a violent storm like we had in July 2019, where McLean got over 5 inches of rain in an hour and a half, the water rose higher and more quickly than it had since we moved in. It rose high enough to cover the footbridge and carry one of the chairs on the little patio in the woods half a mile down the creek, where it emerged from another storm drain, battered but intact. Battling the erosion of the creek walls is an ongoing process. I've taken the advice given by the Northern Virginia Soil and Water Conservation District and used young red twig dogwood stakes to anchor the banks, They root easily in the early spring. I've planted the banks and reinforced them with boulders. Loss of permeable ground and constant construction upstream, along with more extreme weather events, make gardening along the creek very challenging. But this year there were many clutches of wood frog eggs in the creek, and the birds are bathing in it, and it draws a lot of other wildlife to the yard, so there are many positives as well. There are many people who created the components of this video and assisted me in compiling it, and I list them at the end. But in a special category all his own is the wonderful man who designed the garden, Tom Mannion. He passed away far too soon in 2016. I think of him constantly, and I miss him whenever I'm in the garden. I commissioned this mobile, which hangs in a prominent place in the garden. The plaque reads, Tom's Garden, created by Tom Mannion in 2008-2009. Brilliant designer, kind and generous friend. He lives on through this magnificent garden.